Joining us now for more, Valerie Jarrett, former senior advisor to President Obama. A very good afternoon to you. Thanks so much for joining us again. Do you think there'll be a stimulus deal before the election?
Well, I surely hope so. Look, the House passed a package back May 15th, and I know they've been waiting ever since then for the Senate to act and for the White House to be on board. Much of what the Secretary outlined is very important. I also think we need support for state and local and tribal governments. That would add hugely to our economy. And look, we wanted funds way back then to help support the Postal Service, our local elections, making sure in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic, people are able to vote in a safe and a fair way. So there has to be a meeting of the minds. There are people all around the country who are waiting for their government to do right by them. And so let's hope that there is a deal on the horizon.
Well, hope is one thing. Just putting aside if the House has passed something, if the Treasury Secretary said positive things or negative things, what chance do you put on it before the election, given how polarized and contentious politics is right now, as we saw last night?
Well, I hope that we'll call on our elected officials and those who are working in positions like Steve Mnuchin in the Treasury to just work 24 hours a day to get this done. This is what the American people have the right to expect, right? And so I want them to do their jobs, and I hope that the business community and citizens all across our country put pressure on them to do the right thing.
How do you convince, Valerie, that a Biden win and a Democrat Senate, so blue sweep, would be a good thing for the economy and the markets? Because the conventional wisdom is that it would mean higher taxes, corporate taxes, capital gains taxes, wealth taxes, and other sort of not business-friendly kind of moves.
Well, I think they are actually business-friendly. If we put more money into the hands of everyday Americans, they will go out and spend that money. If we invest in our infrastructure, in clean energy, that's going to make us more competitive. And so I look at it as investments. And if you look at the track record over the time President Obama was in office, having inherited the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, cut the unemployment rate in half, the stock market moved up dramatically, and people's lives and livelihood were far better off. And so if you listen to Vice President Biden last night, he outlined a very clear plan for how he would tackle with evidence, scientific-based strategies, this COVID-19 and rebuild our economy better and more fair and more just for everyone. That will be good for the economy and it'll be good for the American people. I think we can do both.
Very specifically, though, Valerie, it was clear that he definitely wants to increase corporate tax rate back to 28%. Even if the cut in the first place was not the right move, and even if long-term perhaps increasing it could be the right move, is now the right time to be increasing taxes on companies whilst so many of them are struggling so much?
Well, he also supports a package that's going to help many of our businesses get on track, particularly our small businesses, which are responsible for the employment of so many Americans. And so I think that it's clear that he's looking at this strategically as a way of shouldering an additional burden on those who can't afford it, and then making room for so many people who are struggling right now, again, particularly those small businesses who've been waiting for the resources, who want their businesses to come back. But what Vice President Biden realizes is that our economy is not going to grow until we get our arms around this pandemic. And let's face it, we got caught terribly flat-footed. And given that we now know that the president knew back in February how dangerous this was going to be, if we had taken reasonable steps back then, we would certainly be far better off today.
Who are the economic advisors that Vice President Biden is listening to most carefully when it comes to issues like this, corporate tax rate and fixing the economy, getting us out of the slump?
He has a treasure trove of advisors, folks that he worked with when he was in the Senate, as well as those who he met during his time in the White House. It is a robust group of folks. And I think if you look at his policies, they are intended to build our economy. His desire is to grow jobs. His desire is to increase wages for working families and make sure that they have the benefits they need, including health care, which is in jeopardy right now before the Supreme Court, so that the American people can thrive. And when they thrive, business will thrive too.
Do you fear, Valerie, ahead of the election, relatively low turnout, and would that hurt your candidate more than the president?
Well, I'm very worried about turnout, and not from the partisan perspective, but I'm worried about it because it shows a lack of engagement by our citizens in our democracy. 100 million eligible Americans didn't vote in the last presidential election. I think that's a travesty. And look, there are efforts going on around the country to suppress the vote, but what I don't want to have happen is for people to disenfranchise themselves. And in the midst of this pandemic, of course, it is far more challenging to vote. So I'm worried about why haven't we not been investing what we should have been doing since this pandemic began to make it easier for people to vote safely? Why aren't we adding resources to the post office so that they can accommodate an influx of voting by mail? Why aren't we extending early vote so that people aren't forced with showing up on election day with long lines, choosing between their health and the right to vote? And so I'm hopeful that we will see a large turnout. I think that's good for the country. I also think it will do well for Joe Biden, because when the vast majority of people do vote, I think that Vice President Biden will win handsomely.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.